Hey guys, Ashley D. Will here, and today I want to share some things that I said to my children while they were growing up. I have 4 daughters, 28, 26, 25, and 19, and obviously they're grown now, they're doing their own thing, but when they were little, these are some things I told them, and I just feel like I'm supposed to share this with y'all. I always said to them that we live in a house. This is a house that we have here, but it is not our home. Our home is in heaven, and we're going to be there one day. But right now, this is just our house that we're staying in while we're here. So I made it very clear that this was a temporary thing, being on this earth, and that heaven was our real home. I would always tell them 5 minutes before we had to leave somewhere, like let's say we were going to the playground or the library, I would always say, okay, y'all go and do your thing, and I'll give you a 5-minute warning or 5-minute heads up before you have to leave. And that way, that gave them a little time to kind of, adjust their mentality and finish up what they were doing so that they wouldn't feel, imposed upon when I said it's time to go. We're leaving now. They'd be like, okay, and they would come. And I would tell them that I was going to do that before I did it. I told them that mommy and daddy would always love you no matter what. We sat them down and told them this, that no matter what, we will always love you. Even if I'm angry, I still love you. Even if I'm sad and I'm crying, I still love you. Even if I'm busy and I'm telling you, wait a minute, I still love you no matter what. And I would remind them of that. I told them that they were all very different from each other and all very unique, and they're all very special. I named and kind of associated each one with a flower. I think one was a rose, one was a tulip, one was a daisy, and one was something else. But so to let them know they're all flowers, but they're all individuals and they're all beautiful. One thing I said frequently is do it now. Sometimes children, especially the ones that like to procrastinate or have ADD, they need to be just told, do it now. Go ahead, do it now. Your chore or whatever it is. I would give them also once they got to be about 5, 6, 7, 8, I would give them a list of maybe, as the older they got, the longer the list would get. And I would give them a list of things to do. Okay, go clean up your room, and then come in, unload the dishwasher, and then something else. Go get your stuff out ready for school tomorrow, something like that. And I would tell them all 3 things so that they would remember all the 3 things, and they would do them, and they'd come back to me and report when they had done them. And sometimes they would forget, and I would have to say, did you do so-and-so? And they go, oh, I forgot the last thing. But it helped them to think ahead, to keep the list in their mind, and to complete a task, and to get rewarded for it by my hug and high five or whatever I did. That's something. And then this is what I always told them. You know how some parents say, well, we're going to raise our kids, and then when they grow up, they can choose whether to follow the Lord or not. No way. I told them, you guys belong to the Lord. He owns you 100%. And there's nothing you can do to ever get away from him, because he's everywhere. And he's the most loving, strong, safe, wonderful place to be. And that you just belong to him. They didn't have a choice. He owns you, and that's just a fact, and you need to know it. I told them, don't take things personally that people say. And so I told them, don't take things personally that people say to you, even if they're angry with you, because it's kind of developing an internal boundary inside the child at a young age so that they can know that what other people say and what other people do is inside their skin, and it's their yard, and it's their territory, and sometimes it mainly has nothing to do with you. They're just speaking from their heart. I told them that they need to call their dad. They can't call him father, because the Heavenly Father is their only father. And when we do that, when we do call our dad father, it's very common to transfer the traits of your earthly dad onto the Heavenly Father. And then you have all these extra barriers between you and the Heavenly Father that you have to break through, when if you had just called them dad in your mind as a child, they would have been very different. Always told them to plant good seeds. And we talked about reaping and sowing and the farmer. There were either 2, 3, and 5, or 3, 4, and 6. But anyway, we were learning about self-control, and we were studying it and doing different things, talking about it. And I said, yeah, what we're going to do now is we're going to go and we're going to show some maybe persnickety old ladies how well behaved y'all can be. So I would take them into like a really nice jewelry store, where you can't touch the glass and it's real. And they would look kind of nervous when I would bring them in, and they would just walk behind me like little ducks in a row, and we would just go around and look, and I would kind of coach them before and say, now don't touch the glass, and y'all can hold hands if you want, but just follow me, and we're going to go through, and I'm going to see how well you're doing with your self-control. And so we would go in the store and look around. I wouldn't stay there that long, and then we would leave, and usually they did really well. And I was very impressed with them. I always encouraged them a lot. I'm their biggest encourager. When they were hyper, or they wouldn't listen, or they were, having trouble when we homeschooled, I would say, okay, time to do some laps. And so they would go in the backyard and have to do 10 laps, just running back and forth across the yard 10 times to get out some energy, or do jumping jacks if it was raining. And that would help them to, settle down. We would always have house check, and we would do that, I guess, once a day, and each child was assigned to one room in the house besides their bedroom, and their job would be to go to that room and check it and make sure everything was in order and things were not getting too crazy, because over time, if you're not maintaining the order of your home, when you have a bunch of kids, you can really have a big mess everywhere, and it's overwhelming. I did also teach them to answer the phone when we had a home phone, and I forget what I told them, but I think they just said, hello, Will residents, Mary speaking, or whatever their name was. And people would comment and say, wow, I thought I was calling an office, but you could tell it was a child's voice. But they had a way that they were supposed to answer the phone. If they wanted to answer the phone, they didn't have to, but if they wanted to, they had to say, hello, Will residents, so-and-so speaking, and then after that, I taught them how to take messages. We always had a quiet time right after lunch, maybe 11 to 12, something like that, where the baby would take her second or first nap, depending on how old she was. And then we also had a quiet time from 5 to 5:30, which otherwise was nuclear meltdown hour. And that was right before Tom came home. And so things were kind of settled down and not crazy when he came home, because they had been resting. And during the quiet time, the older kids could read a story or something, do a puzzle, but the little ones were to take a little nap or just lie down if they couldn't sleep. What else? I read them a lot of stories, and I taught them to read. And then when we went shopping, we would talk about colors, and they would find the colors in the fruits and vegetable, the produce department. We would talk about the numbers and all the different school-related topics when we were shopping. And then I think I had 3 then, and I was pregnant. But I would give one the list, the shopping list of the things we needed. The younger one than that would pick out the item, or maybe it was reverse if they couldn't reach it on the shelf. But anyway, one had the list, one would pick out the item, and the other one was usually the youngest one, would sit in the cart, and that child would get to unload the groceries onto the little conveyor belt. So they all knew they had a job, and they didn't feel distracted or whatever. And I would never take them out unless they had been fed, changed, and had a nap. And then I would take them out, and it would only be for 1 to 2 hours, and I'd bring them back in, because I didn't want them to, be freaked out by being exhausted and not having their little routine. I always tried to help them have a routine so that they would know what to expect. And I always told them what we're going to do before we did it. So I would say, okay, now we've had our lunch and now we're going to go to the park. And when we're done with the park, we're going to come back and read some stories, And so it helped them to know what to expect. And because when I was raised, I never knew what was happening, what was going on, and it felt chaotic to me. Even though from the exterior view, it probably wasn't chaotic. It just felt that way to me. They always had to hold my hand or hold onto the stroller wherever we were. They could not just run wild. They could run wild in the backyard, at a park, or in one of those play areas, at Chick-fil-A or whatever. And they knew always to use your inside voice inside and your outside voice outside. Sometimes I had to remind them often about the inside voice. My ears are very sensitive. What else? Everybody had a job. Somebody would set the table, somebody would load the dishes, somebody would clean up the playroom. And we did have clean team for a while. We all got together and were a team, and we would clean the house and until eventually we got a cleaning lady. But I remember one time my youngest, she think she was like 2 or 3, and they were all cleaning, and she came up to me and she goes, "Mom, I washed the remote." And it was all wet. And I was like, "Oh, thank you so much. You are so sweet." And then later I told her, "Okay, but next time we get a remote, we're not going to wash that. We're going to wash this instead." But I was real proud of her for trying. I did write some children's books for them. Just real simple things like Mary had a dog. She loved him. Like it would be like 4 pages back and front, just a little booklet made with papers and stapled together, and that was their little book to help them learn how to read. I taught them to be gentle with babies and with pets. When they did their jobs, whatever it was, setting the table, loading the dishes, doing the playroom, they had to rotate the jobs. And the rule was you do your job and then you come get a high five from Mom. Well, if they ever complained, which could have been a big problem, but if they ever complained and I would, remind them and say, "No, we're not going to complain. Let's do it. Let's be thankful and let's just do it." If they did insist on complaining, they would get another job on top of that. And they would keep getting more and more jobs until they stopped complaining. Another thing that I did was I didn't want the kids to, when they were learning, a year or however old, and they wanted something, I didn't want them to go, or yell or scream. So I taught them to say a word or a sound to try to communicate. Like sometimes you can use sign language, but I had them try to speak the word. For example, when my youngest was, I don't know, probably like 8 months or whatever, and she was, or maybe closer to a year, she was in the high chair, and she would be finished eating, and she would go, because she wanted to get down, and my back would be to her, and I'd be doing something in the kitchen, and I turned around and I said, "Do you want to get down? Do you want to get down? If you want to get down, say down, down to Mommy, and I will get you down." And so she looked real intimidated, and I turned around and just kept doing what I was doing. And then I heard this, "Dih, dih, dih." And I turned around and she was going, "Dih, dih, dih," trying to say down so she could communicate with me. So that was one way that I helped them to communicate and to feel heard when they were little. So those are just some ideas that I had when my kids were little. And I don't know how you are dealing with having kids, but those are just some ideas, things you can say to your children, things you can do with your children. And so I hope that something I've said has been helpful, and I'll see you next time.